Hale had spent most of his life among stars, drifting from one transport hub to another, yet nothing could have prepared him for the quiet girl who stepped aboard the transport shuttle that day. She was small, fragile-looking, and walked as if the air itself might break her. Her skin had a soft, pale shimmer that reflected the ambient light like a gentle echo of distant nebulae. Her hair, long and dark, framed her face in a way that made her features seem even smaller, more delicate. The crew whispered among themselves, barely daring to speak too loudly, as if her presence alone demanded respect. She didn't carry much, a single light blue travel case clutched tightly to her chest, but her eyes carried something heavier. Notice them first, wide, almost impossibly bright, filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity. They darted around the shuttle with a careful awareness, scanning every corner, every creaking panel. She avoided meeting anyone's gaze directly, but the faintest trace of a smile appeared whenever someone offered her a hand or a word of comfort. When she came near him, her voice was almost a whisper. I'm Lyra," she said, barely audible above the hum of the shuttle's engines. Bent slightly to hear her better, feeling an immediate surge of protectiveness he couldn't explain. "Lyra," he repeated gently, letting the name roll off his tongue. Somehow it fit her perfectly, small, soft, and strange, like a note carried across space. She only nodded, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and the moment passed as if it had never existed. Days passed slowly on the shuttle. Found himself watching her from a distance, noticing her routines, the way she preferred sitting by the window to watch the stars streak by in long, silvery lines. She rarely spoke, but when she did, her words were thoughtful, precise, and tinged with a quiet longing. Sometimes she would hum a faint melody in a language didn't recognize, and he realized it was her way of comforting herself, a tiny shield against the uncertainty of traveling alone in the vast darkness. Despite her silence, Lyra had a presence that could not be ignored. She seemed to notice the little things, how his hands trembled slightly when he lifted heavy equipment, how the lights flickered in the control panel just before a system error. She would offer suggestions quietly, almost shyly, but always with sharp insight that left the crew surprised. Couldn't help but admire her intelligence. She was small, yes, but there was a depth to her that made her feel larger than anyone on the ship. One evening, the shuttle passed through a dense asteroid field, and the cabin lights flickered under sudden turbulence. Saw Lyra's hands grip the edge of her seat tightly, knuckles white. He moved to her side instinctively, offering his hand. She hesitated, then placed hers atop his, warm and soft but trembling ever so slightly. "It's okay," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to her or to himself. She looked up, her eyes meeting his for the first time without hesitation, and in that moment there was an unspoken understanding, a fragile bond forming between two travelers, one human, one alien, caught together in the vast loneliness of space. By the third day, realized he was not just drawn to her, he was aware of her in a way that went beyond mere observation. Her silence was not emptiness. It was a language he was just beginning to understand. Each movement, each faint smile, each thoughtful glance told a story he wanted to hear. She was small, soft-spoken, sweet, but had a strange feeling, one that whispered of hidden strength, that behind her gentle eyes there might be something he could never fully anticipate. And as the shuttle continued its journey across the glittering stars, felt a quiet anticipation building within him, a sense that meeting Lyra had changed something in him. He didn't know what storms might come, what dangers or secrets she carried, but he knew one thing for certain. This small, quiet alien girl was unlike anyone he had ever met, and her story was only beginning. The fourth night aboard the shuttle began quietly, the hum of the engine steady, almost soothing. Had almost convinced himself that Lyra's presence was a gentle comfort, that she was merely a small, delicate girl seeking safety among strangers. But then the shuttle shuddered violently, and the lights flickered, casting long shadows down the narrow corridors. Bolted from his cabin, heart racing, and found Lyra crouched against the wall near the engine room. Her hands were pressed to her head, fingers trembling as though she were trying to keep something inside from escaping. The soft hum she always carried around her body seemed to waver, then pulse sharply. Lyra, he called, rushing forward. Are you hurt? She shook her head rapidly, but her voice was barely a whisper, trembling with urgency. It's not me, it's them. They can track me even here. Frowned, his chest tightening. Who can track you? Who's coming? She didn't answer. Her wide eyes darted toward the hull, as if expecting to see shapes pressing against the walls of the shuttle. Her usually soft-spoken voice now carried a quiet panic. They've found me. I didn't think they could, not so far from my. He reached for her shoulder, but she flinched, shrinking slightly under his touch. She wasn't afraid of him, he could see that, but of herself, or perhaps the power she carried and had never fully understood. Her skin shimmered faintly in the dim light, a ripple of silver patterns running across her arms and neck like tiny electric currents. It was beautiful, almost mesmerizing, but there was something dangerous in it too, something had never witnessed before. You have to trust me, she whispered, her words sharp and deliberate despite their softness. I can't control it if they force me. Force you? Lyra, calm down. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together, he said, trying to keep his own voice steady. But seeing her trembling like this, seeing the flickering light beneath her skin, he felt a pang of helplessness. She was small, so fragile seeming, yet he could sense a storm coiled beneath her quiet exterior. She managed to nod, and with his guidance they returned to her cabin. The corridor seemed longer than before, shadows stretching like fingers across the walls. As they walked, noticed her hands never left her chest, never relaxed. She kept her gaze low, but sometimes he caught the faintest glimmer of fear and determination in her eyes. Once inside, Lyra sank onto the edge of her bed, head in her hands. They will come for me no matter what, she murmured. And if they provoke the part of me they engineered, I might. Her voice caught. She shivered, drawing her knees close to her chest. Sat beside her carefully, unsure whether to touch her. Might what? He asked gently. She shook her head. I don't know, it's not safe, not for anyone. He took a deep breath. Listen, Lyra, you don't have to be afraid right now. We'll get through this. I won't leave your side. Her gaze lifted for a brief moment, locking with his. Saw something shift, a flicker of trust, fragile but real. She let him stay there, and slowly, the trembling in her hands eased. The faint glow along her skin dimmed to a soft shimmer, as if she were forcing herself to stay calm. Outside, the shuttle drifted quietly through the dark expanse of space, unaware of the silent danger that lurked beyond its hull. Inside, watched her, realizing that the girl he thought fragile was fighting battles no one could see. She wasn't small in the ways that mattered. Inside her chest, inside her mind, there was a strength tempered by fear, and he felt both awe and worry in equal measure. That night, as the shuttle continued on its course, didn't sleep. He stayed beside her, listening to the faint hum of her presence and the occasional sigh that betrayed her unease. He didn't know what awaited them in the coming days, what hunters or threats might appear. But he knew one thing clearly. Lyra was far more than a small, soft-spoken girl. She carried a force that could not be ignored, and he would not let her face it alone. The morning light spilled across the shuttle deck, painting the walls in soft gold. Had hoped that the night's terror was over, that Lyra could finally rest. But as he entered the common area, he noticed her standing rigidly by the viewport, her small frame tense, eyes fixed on the endless stretch of stars outside. She didn't seem to notice him at first, as though she were staring not at the stars but through them, beyond them, into some invisible horizon. Morning, he said softly, stepping closer. She didn't answer. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and her hands, usually clasped quietly in front of her, curled into tight fists, hesitated. Something had changed overnight. The tremor of fear he had witnessed in the hallway the night before was gone. In its place was focus, an intensity that made her look older, sharper, and even more distant than before. Finally she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. I need you to trust me today. He raised his eyebrows. I already do. Her gaze lifted to meet his for the briefest instant. Then stay close to the central deck. Don't leave. Wanted to ask why, but there was no room for questions in her tone. Something in her expression told him that today would be different. He nodded, following her as she glided through the corridors with a grace that belied her small size. Hours later, a loud metallic clang shattered the monotony of routine maintenance. Ran to the cargo bay, his heart hammering, and froze. Crates lay scattered across the floor, ripped open as if a storm had passed through. And standing among them was Lyra, small, frail-looking, yet glowing faintly with that strange silver shimmer beneath her skin. Her chest heaved, her hands trembling, but it wasn't fear that drove her movements. It was power, raw and unpredictable. I didn't mean to," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. Her glowing eyes flickered with unease, a storm of emotions colliding within her. "Sometimes it happens without warning. I don't control it. It reacts to danger, to fear." Approached slowly, hands raised to show no threat. "You're not dangerous, Lyra. You're scared. That's different." She shook her head, voice breaking. "They made me this way. They engineered me to be a weapon, and if someone provokes it, if they try to capture me or harm those I care about, then—" Her sentence trailed off, swallowed by a shiver that ran from her shoulders to her fingertips. Kneeled beside her. "Then we make sure no one provokes you. We protect you. That's what we do." Her gaze flickered toward him, and for a moment, vulnerability and defiance warred across her face. "You don't understand. Even if I protect myself, I might hurt them, or worse. I don't want that. I never wanted that." He reached for her hand and she didn't pull away. "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I'm here. You're not alone in this, Lyra. I'll help you control it or survive it, whatever comes next." She blinked, trying to steady herself, and the shimmer beneath her skin slowly faded. The crates, broken and battered, stood as silent witnesses to her untamed strength. Realized that for all her small, soft-spoken demeanor, Lyra carried something no one else could match. A force born not of muscle, but of something deeper, something terrifying and beautiful. For the rest of the day, they stayed close. Lyra didn't speak much, but when she did, it was in measured words, each one deliberate, each one carrying weight. She confided in him briefly about her past, a childhood spent in isolation, training, and fear, and he listened, knowing that this small girl had endured more than most could imagine. By nightfall, understood something vital. Lyra's fragility was only surface deep. Beneath it lay a strength that was unpredictable, overwhelming, and profoundly human in its emotional resonance. And for the first time, he realized that the girl he had admired for her quiet presence was also someone he might need to depend on for survival. As the shuttle drifted silently through the void, sat beside Lyra and watched her trace patterns on the floor with her fingers, whispering to herself in a language he couldn't understand. She looked smaller than ever, yet somehow stronger, as if surviving her own power had shaped her into someone both tender and unbreakable. And knew the days ahead would test them both in ways neither could predict. But for now, at least, she had allowed him to see the fracture beneath the surface, and the quiet, fierce heart that beat inside the small, soft-spoken, and sweet alien girl he had come to care for. The shuttle had barely entered the outer rim of the system when the alarms blared, a sharp, piercing sound that shook the crew from their routines. Stomach tightened as he saw a sleek black ship materialize through the viewport, its angular wings cutting through the void like a predator. He turned to look at Lyra, and in that instant, he realized how different she was from everyone else on board. Her small frame had gone rigid, and her wide eyes were fixed on the approaching vessel with a mix of fear and calculation. "They're here," she whispered, almost to herself. Her voice was soft, yet carried a weight that made his chest tighten. "My pursuers." His heart raced. "Pursuers? Lyra, we can handle this together. What do we need to do?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, placing her hand lightly on his sleeve. Her touch was small, warm, almost fragile, but it carried a silent urgency. "Stay with me," she said quietly, "no matter what happens." The crew scrambled to seal the shuttle's hatches. The black ship hovered close, releasing magnetic clamps that latched onto the hull. The hum of the engines rose, mingling with the tension that had gripped every living being aboard. Crew members shouted orders, but all could focus on was Lyra, the girl who had seemed so small, so gentle, now standing like a silent warrior against impossible odds. "They want me," she whispered, almost sadly. "They engineered me for this, to be hunted, to be captured, to be something I don't want to be." Gripped her shoulder gently. "Then we stop them, whatever it takes." Her silver eyes met his, glowing faintly in the dim cabin light. "You don't understand. If they provoke the part of me they built, the part I cannot fully control, I might lose myself, and everything around me might suffer." Before could respond, a section of the shuttle hull warped, sparks flying as the clamps tore through. He shouted, "Everyone to the central deck." The hunters emerged, stepping from the breach with armor that gleamed red under the flickering lights. Their masks reflected the small interior, faceless and cold, scanning for her. Felt a pang of fear, but he didn't step back. He stepped forward. "You won't take her," he said, voice low but steady. "Not while I'm here." Lyra's hands clenched slightly, but her frame did not quiver. There was a tension in her, a storm barely contained. Realized then that the girl who had seemed fragile, delicate, and soft-spoken carried within her a force that could turn the tide of battle with a single moment of will. The hunters raised their weapons, the red lights of their armor flashing across the walls. Noticed Lyra's breath deepen, steadying herself. Her hands glimmered faintly as if charged with the energy of the stars themselves. Her voice dropped lower, stronger than it had ever been. "Stay behind me," she said. Before anyone could act, she moved. Not with panic, not with fear, but with precise, controlled power that shattered the air around her. Sparks flew, crates toppled, and the hunters staggered back, taken aback by the sudden surge. Saw the glow intensify along her arms, illuminating the corridor as if the room itself recognized her strength. The force of her motion pushed him gently against the wall, not in harm but in protection. She pinned him there, her glowing eyes scanning, assessing, preparing for the next attack. Every second stretched into eternity and yet felt calm. Not because the danger was gone, but because he knew, without question, that Lyra could face it. When the hunters finally recovered, they hesitated, saw the fear in their postures, the recognition of power they could not comprehend. Lyra's hands shimmered faintly, a quiet promise of what might come if they dared approach further. And then, as swiftly as it had begun, the energy faded. Lyra sagged slightly, exhausted, trembling in ways that made her seem smaller than before, but caught her, steadying her. She whispered, almost apologetically, "I didn't want you to see me like that." Only shook his head, holding her gently. "I don't care about that, I care about you." Outside, the black ship lingered for a moment before retreating, leaving the shuttle and its small, extraordinary passenger safe, for now, but knew this was only the beginning. And he realized something profound. The small, soft-spoken, sweet alien girl he had met was far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. And the heart behind that power was not built for war, but it was brave enough to face it. The shuttle's corridors echoed with alarms and sparks, and the red glow from the invading ship's lights painted every surface in sharp, dangerous colors. His heart raced as he watched Lyra step forward. She had been small, soft-spoken, and fragile when he first met her. But now, every fiber of her being radiated controlled energy, a quiet storm coiled just beneath the surface. The hunters advanced again, weapons raised, their masks reflecting the alien glow of her skin. Instinctively moved to shield her, but before he could reach her, Lyra acted. In a blur of motion, faster than his eyes could follow, she threw herself between him and the attackers. Felt the weight of her small hands push him against the wall. He froze, not in fear but in awe. She didn't harm him. She held him there, steadying him, protecting him, as though the wall itself had become a shield powered by her will. Her eyes glowed with a fierce silver light, brighter and more vivid than ever before. "Stay behind me," she commanded, her voice deep and commanding, a startling contrast to the quiet whispers he had heard just days ago. Her words carried authority, confidence, and a promise of protection that seemed to bend the air around her. The hunters hesitated, their movements uncertain. They had clearly underestimated her, thinking her small frame meant weakness. They were wrong. With a sudden motion, she raised her other hand, and the corridor itself seemed to shift with the force of her presence. One by one, the attackers were hurled back, slammed into the walls with a strength that reasoned. Metal groaned under the impact, and sparks rained like fireflies across the deck. Held his breath, feeling the tremor in the walls through his fingertips. He had never seen anything like this. She was small, almost delicate in appearance, but the power she wielded was immense, unrestrained, and terrifyingly precise. And through it all, her hands remained on him, keeping him safe as she faced the chaos. When the last hunter finally fell to the floor, unconscious or too stunned to move, Lyra's glow slowly faded. She sagged slightly, trembling, the weight of the fight pressing down on her even as her victory became clear. Caught her before she could collapse, holding her gently against his chest. Her body was small and soft, yet warm and alive with the remnants of the force she had released. I didn't want you to see me like that," she whispered, voice broken, almost ashamed. Her silver eyes dimmed, returning to their usual gentle glow. Shook his head, pressing his forehead lightly against hers. "I don't care," he said softly. "I care that you're safe, that's what matters." She trembled for a moment, resting against him, and he could feel the rapid rhythm of her heartbeat. For all her strength, there was vulnerability beneath it, a fragile part of her that had been hidden until now. Realized then that her power wasn't just physical or kinetic. It was tied to her emotions, her care, her fear, and her love. That was what made her extraordinary. For a long moment, neither spoke. The shuttle hummed around them, silent but for the distant alarms fading into nothing. Could feel the enormity of what had happened. A small, soft-spoken girl had defended not just herself, but everyone aboard the ship, wielding strength beyond imagination. And through it all, she had pinned him to the wall, not to harm, but to protect, to keep him close and safe in a moment when nothing else could. Finally, Lyra lifted her head, silver eyes meeting his with something new, gratitude, relief, and a flicker of fear. "I'm not sure I can control it every time," she admitted. "Sometimes it comes without warning, and I don't know who I might hurt." "You don't have to control it perfectly," replied. "You just have to trust yourself, and trust me, I won't leave you no matter what." For the first time, Lyra allowed herself a small, genuine smile. It was soft, quiet, and yet stronger than any glow or weapon. Realized that this small, gentle girl he had met days ago had shown him a courage far beyond the human norm, and a heart that refused to be broken, even by forces designed to destroy her. And as the shuttle drifted in silence, the stars outside twinkling like distant witnesses, knew one truth clearly. The girl who had pinned him to the wall was small, sweet, and soft-spoken, but she was also unstoppable. The shuttle was quiet now, the red glow of the alarms replaced by the soft hum of engines drifting through space. Guided Lyra to a maintenance room, a small, enclosed space where they could rest and collect themselves. She sank onto a crate, her small frame curled slightly, hands clasped together as if holding herself together from the inside. Her silver eyes were dim, no longer glowing with power, but full of a fragile, human-like vulnerability that made his chest ache. "I didn't want it to happen," Lyra whispered, barely audible. "I never wanted to fight. I just wanted to live quietly, to learn, to have a life where I can choose who I am." Crouched beside her, careful not to startle her. "I know, and you still have that choice. What you did today, what you are, it doesn't take that away." Her gaze flickered to him, a mixture of shame and uncertainty crossing her delicate face. "But they built me to fight, to defend, to kill if necessary. And even though I don't want to, the power inside me, it reacts to fear, to anger, to danger. I can't always stop it, and I'm terrified of what I could become if I lose control." Reached out, placing a gentle hand over hers. His fingers were bigger, warmer, but he let her lead the contact, letting her comfort him as much as he comforted her. "Lyra," he said softly. Power is what makes someone dangerous. It's the heart behind it. And your heart is not built for war. It's built for care, for loyalty, for protection. And that's exactly what you showed today. She drew a shaky breath and for a moment thought he saw her smile, small, hesitant, but real. I I don't want to hurt anyone, she admitted. Especially not you. I don't want anyone to fear me, not even my own allies. You don't have to be afraid, said. Not while I'm here. Not while anyone is here. You're not alone anymore, Lyra, and no one should ever make you feel like you are. For a long moment they sat in silence, listening to the hum of the engines, the occasional creak of metal as the shuttle drifted through the stars. Could feel the tension leaving her slowly, the tremor in her hands fading as she let herself relax just a little. She was still small, still soft-spoken, but the weight she carried, the fear, the responsibility, the power, was slightly lighter because someone else shared it with her. I don't even know how to live like a normal person, Lyra murmured, almost to herself. I've spent so long hiding, running, fighting, and now I don't even know what that means. Smiled gently. Normal is different for everyone. Maybe for you, normal means learning that it's okay to be powerful and gentle at the same time. Maybe it means trusting people enough to let them see both sides of you. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and she looked away, pressing her small hands to her face. I never thought anyone would see me like that, not as both dangerous and me. You're extraordinary, Lyra said quietly. But that's not all you are. You're also kind, thoughtful, brave, and capable of love. That's the side most people don't see, but it's what makes you you. She lowered her hands, her silver eyes meeting his. For the first time since the attack, there was no fear there, only trust, fragile and growing. She leaned slightly against him, small and quiet, and let herself breathe. Outside, the stars moved slowly past the shuttle windows, indifferent to the battles and fears that humans and aliens carried inside their hearts. But inside that tiny maintenance room, something profound had shifted. Lyra's heart, so long trapped in fear and obligation, was opening, if only a little, to the possibility of a life she could choose herself. Realize then that strength wasn't just in her power. It was in her choice, to be gentle, to protect, to care even when it could have been easier to fight without thought. And he knew that no matter what dangers lay ahead, she had already shown him the greatest strength of all, a heart not built for war but capable of extraordinary courage. The stars outside the shuttle glimmered silently, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded inside. Stood at the control deck, his hands resting lightly on the console as he watched Lyra move slowly among the crew, checking on systems and quietly offering guidance. She looked smaller now, softer, almost ordinary, but knew the truth. That quiet, delicate figure held a strength no one could measure, a force that had protected them all and could have destroyed everything in an instant. A damaged enemy ship drifted past in the distance, tethered loosely by a remote towing unit. The hunters would report what had happened, or perhaps they would keep their silence. Either way, knew there was a choice to be made, one that could change everything for Lyra. Lyra said softly, stepping beside him. Her voice had its usual quiet tone, but beneath it he sensed the lingering weight of power restrained. They'll be back eventually. They won't stop hunting me, not while I exist. He nodded slowly. Then we make sure that doesn't matter. You stay free. I'll fight for that. I'll fight to make sure no one ever treats you like a weapon again. Her silver eyes widened slightly and she hesitated. You could have left, she murmured. You could have ignored me, stayed safe, stayed human. I could have, he admitted, looking at her directly. But I didn't. Humans fight hardest for the people they care about. I care about you, Lyra, and I won't abandon you. She lowered her gaze, pressing her small hands together in front of her. Noticed the subtle tremor, the lingering tension from her earlier battle. She had chosen to trust him, and that was more powerful than any force she could wield. The crew gathered quietly, waiting for instructions. They had expected a decision that might compromise Lyra's freedom, that might hand her over to authorities who would see her only as a weapon, but shook his head firmly. "She stays free," he said clearly. "She saved this ship, she protected us, and she deserves the choice no one else ever gave her." There were murmurs among the crew, some questioning, some nodding, but did not falter. He had made the decision, and he would defend it. Lyra's small hand found his arm, her touch light but deliberate, grounding him. "You're brave," she whispered, almost in awe. "Not in the way my people see bravery, but in a human way, in a way that gives me hope." Smiled gently. "Humans have a strange kind of strength. It's not always visible. It's in the choices we make, the bonds we protect, and the lives we refuse to harm. That's the strength I trust in." For the first time since he met her, Lyra allowed herself to relax completely. She leaned slightly against him, small and soft, no longer tense, no longer trembling with fear. Her silver eyes, now calm, reflected not only the lights of the shuttle but something deeper, hope, relief, and a quiet joy she hadn't felt in years. "You've shown me something I didn't know I could have," she said softly. "A life where I can decide who I am, not who they made me to be." Took her hand gently. "And you will. I'll be here, not to control, not to command, but to stand with you. We face the stars together." Outside, the shuttle continued its journey through the galaxy, stars streaking past like diamonds in the void. Inside, a small alien girl, once soft-spoken and delicate, had found her place, not as a weapon, not as a prisoner, but as herself. And a human had chosen to protect that freedom, to honor her right to exist beyond fear, beyond power, beyond expectation. Lyra looked up at, her faint smile brighter than any star beyond the viewport. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "This is what humans do. We fight for the people who matter." For the first time she allowed herself to believe it. Small, soft-spoken, sweet, and yet unstoppable. Together they would face whatever the universe could throw at them, bound by trust, courage, and a choice that no one else could make. And in that moment, understood the truth of humanity. Strength was not measured in weapons or power or fear. It was measured in love, loyalty, and the courage to stand for what was right, even when it was easier to walk away. The shuttle drifted onward, carrying two souls who had found each other in the vastness of space, ready to face the unknown together.